What is that unique quality that enables an artist to draw? Is it instinctive? Is it talent? Is the artist gifted or born with that technique? I think not. I think that the artist is a person that has accumulated bits of information which they use as a referent for drawing. I'm going to attempt to provide you with those bits that will enable anyone to draw. I do not believe that you have to be a born artist, and I know that anyone can draw because I've worked with children and adults. You have to accumulate certain habits. For example, you sketch a series of lines and try to maintain the vertical position and the same distance between the lines to avoid discrepancies in vision. Then, after you've accomplished this, try to draw lines that are parallel to one another in an angular position. And the reason that an artist sketches along rather than draws a direct line is it permits them to change their mind and move the line to the right or left so as to maintain the parallel position. Here you see it at different angles. So if you practice this, this will enable you to draw many different configurations. So practice horizontal lines. Then practice drawing the letter T and make sure that the T is crossed by a horizontal line rather than angularity. Maintain visually the ability to draw a horizontal intersection to the center line. Most people are not too good at that. They draw a vertical line. Now, even the drawing of a vertical line is guided by the edge of the canvas or paper. This guides me in drawing a vertical line. I'm looking at this edge and I'm sketching. The reason I sketch with incremental lines is so I can change my mind and change the parallel to the vertical. So when I draw the horizontal line, I use this as my guide. And that tells me that I cross that line at 90 degrees, or parallel to this edge, and the vertical line is parallel to this edge. So after you've acquired these habits of drawing, it will enable you to sketch much faster. For example, in drawing a circle, it's very difficult to draw a circle direct. So what the artist does is sketch. The reason for these incremental lines is you can change your mind. If you don't like a certain aspect of it, you can weave in or out, and then when you get around this area, you can control it better. And then you follow the rough line that you've got, and by these incremental moves, you can come closer to the shape of a true circle. This is not guaranteed. The only true circle is by instrument. But by sketching, if you draw directly, you can't change it. You can't change these flat zones. But in sketching, you can move through it and correct your errors. So sketching is continuous correction of the movement of your pen or pencil. I have in this instant drawn lines in a non-parallel system. So you can see that these are getting closer together. These distances are not accurate. This is somewhat closer to being parallel to one another. This is a T with a 90 degree intersection, or horizontal to the vertical. Horizontal to the vertical. In order to draw an ellipse, the best way to go about it is to draw a vertical line in the center of a horizontal line. Now, whatever this distance is, you draw a circle at the end of this horizontal line. The circle itself is about 1/2 of this distance. In other words, there's the size of the circle, and you draw one at the other end, which is as near the proportions as the ones that you've just drawn. In other words, these are about the same. Then you turn the paper and get an arc from the top of this circle to that point and back into the top of the end circle. Then you rotate the paper once again and go from the circle to that dot into this circle. Then you turn it back to the horizontal. This is approximately the way you draw an ellipse. In order to clean it up, you have to turn the paper again and clean up these lines so that they flow smoothly, no abrupt change in the line. Then finish this off smoothly, and then work on this end. You don't have to worry about the inside of the ellipse. Once you get that, you turn it over again, reverse it, and you clean this line up. I'm about to draw a glass, and when I do, before I even start anything, I draw a line which will look like the letter H. I then draw a center line. I even turn the paper to make it easier, to make sure that this crosses at right angles to the center line. The bottom line also crosses at right angles to the center line. I then form an ellipse around the upper line. I then form an ellipse on the lower system, but the ellipse is somewhat deeper. I then join both ends. I then heavy up the outline of the ellipse so it's very clear, and I use the natural movement of the wrist to get the right curvature. I also clean up this line on the bottom. This is basically how we draw a glass. What I'm about to draw is a scenery at the ocean. For example, if a human being was seated on the beach, and this represents a simplified drawing of a person seated on the sand. This is the same drawing of a person seated on the sand. And this is a third drawing, which is going to have 3 bits of information that you can use. Now, this is the sand region. The camera or portrait is taken from the ground level. That is, the camera would be on the sand. So the horizon line and ground line is where this person is seated on the sand, ground line. The horizon line and ground line become one when the camera is about sand level. If you raise the camera so it's about halfway up the back of the person, the horizon line moves to that point. If you raise the camera to about eye level, that is, the person seated on the beach, his eye level, the back of his head, the horizon line always is at the height of the camera. The horizon line is where the sea meets the sky. So you can tell where the camera was held by looking for the horizon line. Sometimes it's possible to draw with a single vanishing point. In a single vanishing point, you draw a rectangle. Let's say I'm drawing a shoebox. I draw this rectangle first, and then head the upper section of the shoebox for the single vanishing point. If the box is open, I draw a corner line right where these 2 points intersect. And then I draw a corner line at this point. That gives us an open box. The elementary steps of drawing a series of telephone poles going along a highway toward the vanishing point. We'll start with the first telephone pole, which is a vertical line. The second stage of the drawing is to add or fake the distance of the next telephone pole. The next thing is to X that box to get the mid portion or the middle line of the perspective. Then you head the baseline to the middle line and up to the upper line, which gives you the position of the next telephone pole. We fake the second telephone pole, then we X the box. The purpose of Xing the box is to get the middle line, which also goes to the vanishing point. Then we run a line from the base to the middle line, and that gives you the distance of the next telephone pole, which is shown in this illustration. And the process is repeated continuously until you get a series of telephone poles all going toward the vanishing point, as shown here. If I have a certain vision in mind of people standing in a field, I go about drawing a horizon line, always the same process. So you're doing nothing new now. And I put a dot on one side of the horizon line, on the right, one on the left, and I fake, meaning no laws involved, I fake an outline of a human being, which is about a circle and about, the body is about 2 squares. So here I got that, and the legs run down about the same distance. So if that is my person, if that's the person I wish to draw, I head that person for the vanishing point. I use a ruler as a rule, and I head it for the vanishing point. This is the knee region. I head that for the vanishing point. So if I wish to draw a person over here, I get the head size as these lines converge toward the vanishing point. That would be the size of the head. Here it would be this size. Here it would be about that size. So the body or shoulder would be this wide and go down to about the same point here, only it's getting smaller as we go back. Now this is a rendering or drawing or outline of people standing in a field. However, if you wish to draw a person standing here, say, not in line, you put a baseline down where you want the feet to go and go horizontally over till you hit this line. Then climb up and hit the top of that line. Then move back to the region and transfer the head size over this way, and you draw a head. Then transfer the torso over to the same point, and when you hit this line, you go to the left, so you get this region of the body, and then you get the legs. Now suppose you want a person standing here. It's very simple. Just draw the line horizontal. When you hit this, climb up and take it back over this way. So you get the size of a person standing anywhere in this field. If you still don't understand me, if I want a person up front, I will extend this, and the head size becomes larger due to the lines moving toward the vanishing point. So I don't know how deep to make the body, so I extend this forward, and I get the length of the torso. Then I get the legs. So you can draw, say you want a person standing here, right here. Head this over sideways, horizontally, toward the vanishing point lines. Then climb up and take the information off to the side, the size of the head, whatever that is. Take it off to the side, the torso, take it off to the side, so you get a head, you get the torso, and you get the legs. So you can draw a person anywhere in the picture just by taking the information off the sides. Of course, I'm going to go over this very carefully, but this is how it's done. No magic. I'm about to draw a horizon line. The horizon line is where the sea meets the sky. When you go to the beach and you look out, you see that line along the water that divides the sky from the ocean. Now, what I do here is briefly sketch a wave system. And then I put a dot behind it, and I move away from that dot through the edges of the wave system. So as the waves come into the foreground, they increase in size and width. This is just the basic principles. They're not trying to show you how to draw waves. If I want to draw a wave in this position here, I take my information from the side. So any wave system in this region is about that wide. In this region, they're about this wide. And as we come forth, the wave system increases in height and width. But I would really put it in between so it looks more coherent. So a wave system in this region is based on this width. So a wave system in this region is based on this width. And back here, they would be the same proportion. So this is how you go about drawing waves on a picture. Now, if I'm to draw clouds, I will draw a cloud system. Again, this is not showing you how to draw. Then I put a dot underneath the middle of the cloud and head out away from that dot. That gives me the size of the clouds in the foreground and very large in the near foreground and smaller in the background. So even clouds move toward a vanishing point. So if I have to draw a cloud here, I get my information from this distance. It doesn't need to be exactly that length. If I want to draw a cloud, say here, I get my information from the width of this point, which is approximately this. So here you see the clouds moving down toward a vanishing point. And the waves also move toward a vanishing point, meaning this dot on the picture. So you can do this if you wish and draw the cloud or the wave systems within those lines. In drawing an aerial view of the city, you just draw a horizontal or longitudinal boxes, top view, any shape at all. Now, if I'm going to do an aerial view of a city, I put a dot anywhere on the paper in this general region. Then I extend lines away from the dot. This is no instruction yet. This is just information that I have to use to draw an aerial view of a city. Then I extend this corner line toward that dot and stop before I get there. Once I get there, I'm turning the paper for convenience, and I'm extending this line upward. I don't know how far. This tells me how far. I head this down for the dot, and I head this down for the dot, and I terminate at the same angle this line's at, here. And this angle here tells me the angle I use at the base. So that might be, what you're looking at is an aerial view of a skyscraper. You might not see it yet. Then I'm going to put a street around it. And just by extending it to the fore and back this way, and extending it beyond the building, then I'm going to put lines in the building that will help me with the rendering. All of these lines comprise the windows of the building going down toward this dot. You notice I'm changing the angle to fit in with the shape of the building and also head for this point. Some of you might see the building now. And if I want to draw another building, I extend this right on down on that line. And this line tells me the angle. I don't need to imagine anything. I'm turning the paper for convenience. I'm taking the baseline of this building where it touches the ground, extending it forward to this building. Then I'm taking the street line at the base of the building, projecting it forward, and turning in this direction. And then I'm turning beyond this line. I go beyond that line and turn it. Now here you see another building. So I'm going to draw the windows horizontally, or vertical from your point of view. So I draw a lot of windows, and as I get toward the bottom, they get closer and closer together. That's all there is to that building. Now, if I want to draw a building here, I still go to the same dot. You only got one dot in the illustration. So I head this for the dot, and I stop it when it gets to the baseline of the building, and extend this vertical forward. And I head this for the baseline of the building, and this. Then I'm going to put in the same kind of lines because you're used to it now. Now, I'm going to add a street, a sidewalk down here. And then I'm going to bring this building down toward the dot. I don't need to use these lines. These lines just serve as a guide. They help me control the direction of the line. And I'm going to stop at about where this line stops. Then I'm going to go forward again. And then I'm going to bring this line down toward the dot. So what you get here, All of these act as guides what direction I'm to move in. I move right on down to the same level this building's at and cut it off to the same point. I'm going to strengthen this line a little. Now I'm going to put a street around these buildings, a sidewalk. However, if you still do not get the message, I'm going to extend this building down to the same level. Then I'm going to extend this building. Notice I'm following the lines here. And I can only run that to that line. This next one goes in and stops inboard just as this does. This is my guide for the baseline. And I'll just finish off with this one. So this is an aerial perspective. And no matter how many buildings you draw in here, they all go to the same dot. That is in this type of view. That's an aerial view, like a plane flying over a city. The next drawing is just a little more detailed. If you look close, there's an aerial view of skyscrapers. And down these little dots obviously would be automobiles traveling in the street down below. So here you see the same thing shaded with more emphasis on detail. Again, this is not instruction. This is a general system illustrators use when they work. It doesn't come out of the mind. They are lawful processes which they put together to help emphasize the visual. This is a visual aid. In studying this illustration from any view, it's still an aerial view of flying over a city. You can also emphasize the shape of the building by shading the same sides dark. That will help emphasize the shape of the buildings. In order to be able to draw, it is necessary to use a certain procedure. The first line that I sketch is called the horizon line. Then I put a dot on the right side and one on the left side. I then draw a vertical line about 1 inch long, somewhat below the horizon line. This is the horizon line, this is the right vanishing point, and this is the left vanishing point. I then join the top of that line to the vanishing point, and the bottom to the same vanishing point. I then repeat the same process on the right-hand side, the top of the line to the vanishing point, and the bottom of the line to the vanishing point. If I'm going to draw a book, I cut this off where I think a book, what the proportions of a book might be. So I might cut it about here and about there. You'll have to use your own judgment in cutting these drawings. Once that's complete, you head the top of that line to the vanishing point. Only 2 vanishing points. If it doesn't go to the vanishing point, the drawing's not going to work out. So you head the top of that, these 2 new lines to the vanishing point. And there you have the outline of a book. Now to make it more precise, I will make this the back end of the book by rounding it out somewhat. And I'll repeat that at the other end. There you see the basis of a book. Here you see the corner line transferred directly underneath. Here is the horizon line. If you draw below the horizon line, the corner line, you get an upper view of a box. That is, the camera is above the height of the box. If you draw below that, you're even higher above the box. If you draw in the sky region, you will see the underside. So if you wish to show the underside, you draw above the horizon line. If you wish to get a cat's eye view or a chihuahua's eye view of a Kleenex box, you draw in the middle of the line. So you got the viewpoint of, say, 3 inches off the ground, the camera looking at a box of Kleenex. I might even shade this side of the box, so it'll help you visualize. If I'm about to draw a book, I use the same system. Emphasize the corner line, draw the kind of box a book would fit into, take all lines to vanishing point 1 and vanishing point 2. How far down you go depends on how much of the cover you wish to show. If this is a drawing of a book, and I want this to be the back side of the book, I will curve this. And then I will put a curve on this distant line. And that'll be more like a book. Now, to emphasize the quality of the book, I'm going to draw lines coming away from the vanishing point and very close together. Fake them, just as I'm doing here. And if you wish to emphasize that, you can emphasize this line more so and extend, then turn it upside down again and head this toward the vanishing point, the pages of the book. Now, if you wish to stack books and you want your drawing to look somewhat sophisticated, instead of stacking one book on top of the other, as most people do, because it's simpler, you head this for the vanishing point, you curve this line, just as this one is curved, and then you head the book underneath to the same vanishing point and cut it off at the same place. And then turn your page so it's easier to pull your lines from the vanishing point. So here you have an illustration of 2 books, one piled on top of the other. But if you wish to do a more sophisticated drawing, you can offset your corner line on the next book. This is the corner line of the book underneath. And I'm moving this vanishing point 2 inches inboard or 3 inches inboard. Notice that this is about 3 inches inboard. And I'm heading the bottom of the book for the new vanishing point. This is the only time a book doesn't follow the law. Now, if you've moved 3 inches over this way, you have to take this vanishing point and move it 3 inches to the left, so that this heads 3 inches to the left, and you can cut it off. So here's another book underneath at a completely different angle. And if you wish to put a 3rd book, a 4th book down, you can move the vanishing point 4 inches or 3 inches to the right and head this for the new vanishing point. This is the corner line. I'm going to put the corner line here this time. You're free to put the corner line any place you choose to. So you head this 3 inches to the right of the vanishing point. Then you drop down and you bring this 3 inches to the right. And you head this for that new vanishing point. And this is how you draw a series of books stacked in different positions. Now, you have to practice this quite a bit. Use a ruler. Do not sketch. And do not vary the angles too much, just so till you gain control. Now, if I wanted this to be the back end of the book, I have to do this, and the other end would not be seen. I will make this the back end of the book. And here you have it, a stack of books, which is more sophisticated than just drawing one book on top. In order to create the letters of the alphabet and to facilitate ease of illustration, what you can do is X this box, which I'm going to do now, from corner to corner, and create a frame within that box. Now, here you fake it. There's no law. You put a dot on a portion of that X, and that dot represents the beginning of a frame illustration. By frame, I mean from that dot toward the vanishing point. Where it touches the X, stop. Then head it for the opposite vanishing point. Where it touches the X, stop the line. And then head for the right-hand vanishing point. Then you head it for the left vanishing point, and you get this frame. Now you create a little perspective square in the midsection. In other words, that square goes to the vanishing point. And then you head that right through. You'll see what this is about in a very short time. I'm heading that little square for the vanishing point to visualize all kinds of shapes and forms. Now, this is somewhat similar to the electronic clocks that you see today. They have all these lines in them, and by illuminating particular lines, they get different numbers or letters. So to get the letter A, you would use all of this. To get the letter E, you would use the two ends. You would eliminate this business and just trace the letter E. For the letter A, this is all square lettering. You would run it to the vanishing point and eliminate the bottom system, the bottom perspective. So you get the letter A. Here you see the letter A. The reason we use a great deal of repetition is so that you'll tend to remember this procedure. Again, this is a drawing of a box in a vertical position in which we're about to start putting lettering into the face of the box, as shown in the next illustration. Here you see the Xing of the box, in which you draw a line from corner to corner. The next phase would be putting a dot on some point on the X. That's up to you where you put that dot. You put the dot here, then you go vertical. And when you hit the X, you head for the vanishing point. When you hit the X on the bottom, you head for the vanishing point. Of course, I take this information of this far corner straight down through the box, so I know where to head this, which is left out, and then we pull away from the vanishing point. So you get the letter C, in which one side is shaded to help emphasize the solidity of the letter C. This is the preparation of a box in a vertical position, and we're about to draw lettering on the face side of the box. Okay, this is how we face the major portion of the box with the letter S by utilizing the cross and drawing a side view in perspective of the letter S. Of course, the next drawing will show the depth added to this. This is a drawing of the S with the extended systems on it, so it looks more like a solid object. You will notice that there are 3 lines headed for the vanishing point in all directions. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So you always check to see if you've got 3 lines headed for the vanishing point. This illustration shows shading on the face side of the S to help emphasize the solidity. Again, we're emphasizing the same procedure, the drawing of the box in the vertical position. The next addition is to X the box from corner to corner. Following that procedure, we then draw the face of the letter A, followed by the solidification by heading toward the vanishing point so that the lettering comes out like a block letter. This is the letter A drawn on the face of the block. Then we head this toward the vanishing point, and you'll notice that this is headed for the distant vanishing point. There are only two vanishing points, on the left and right, and all lines go to the vanishing point. Just make sure you've double-checked that. In order to find where to cut off this line, you head this corner in the forward direction toward the vanishing point, and that tells you where to cut it off. This is shaded on the face side to help emphasize the solidity of the drawing. This is the same procedure used to draw the letter M on the face surface. We then X the box. Following that, we draw 3 vertical lines, and this might be the letter M. Of course, we then follow that by heading the base of those lines toward the vanishing point. We utilize this corner and head it toward the vanishing point. That tells you where to cut off each extension headed for the vanishing point. In order to draw the legs of a table or the block letters, remember there are always 3 lines. 1, corner line, 2, 3. All these lines are comprised of 3 lines. So if you don't find 3 lines in your drawing, there is an error. You draw the kind of box that you feel the dress will fit into. First the corner line. Then all your markings are done on the corner line. There's a separation between drawers right on down the corner line. And once you've established that with a ruler, these are fixed dimensions, then extend them toward the vanishing point. To get the middle of the box, you always exit from corner to corner, somewhat like this. You go from one corner to the other corner. And then you turn your ruler and go from corner to corner again. And that's where the true middle would be of the dresses. So the middle in perspective shifts beyond center somewhat. So this is how you go about drawing furniture. If you want to draw a chair, you draw the kind of box a chair would fit into, which we'll go over many times, but mostly the fundamentals of creating an image. If you're about to draw a chair, say, you draw the basic form of a chair, or an end table. Let's say that's an end table. You do it that way, then you decide how thick you want the upper portion of the table to be. So you put a dot here. Then you head that dot for the vanishing point, and you head it to the opposite vanishing point. And so when you're through with that little drawing, you wind up with something like this. In other words, if you're drawing an end table, you create these lines, and then you get 3 lines to the legs, always 3, 1, 2, 3, and the letter V on the bottom. That V goes to this vanishing point, the other end of the V to the opposite. The same is true for all the legs of the table. The general method designers use to do a rendering. They use vanishing points, and those are the tools or the instrument that gives you the kind of information you need. In drawing ellipses or plates or glass or a bowl on a tabletop, no matter what position the table is in, the ellipse or the plate or the bowl or the cup is always at the same angle the horizon is at. It's horizontal, regardless of the position of the table. It's always horizontal or in the earth plane. If I want to draw a boat, say like this, the first thing I do is create a box that boat would fit into. And I'm going to show you that in the next illustration. This represents the perspective layout of the block or box that boat would fit into. The first thing I must do is X the forward plane. That is, run a line from corner to corner, and then from this corner to the opposite corner. That gives me the true center line. Then I can extend that center line back toward the vanishing point. then I can fake the curvature of the boat within that block. That is the upper portion of the block. Then I create an ellipse in the earth plane here. As you see, just a portion of an ellipse. In other words, if I completed the ellipse, it would look something like that, and it always runs horizontal, the same direction that the horizon is in, the major axis of the ellipse. So I'm going to heavy it up. Once I get this curvature, and where this portion of the curvature touches this line going to the vanishing point, I head across toward the other vanishing point. And that tells me where this curvature meets the other side. So it's quite different, the curve on the far side, than the one in the foreground. Yeah, this is the ellipse in the horizontal plane, and this is the curvature of the front portion of the boat. Now, once I detect the point in which this curvature touches the line going to the vanishing point, I head it for the opposite vanishing point, and that tells me where this curve will intersect that line. So here you have two different shapes on both sides. Then the next thing I do is give the boat back rake. That is, I slant the boat. And once I've finished doing that, I then repeat the same curvature on the bottom and head it for the vanishing point and join this. So I got the boat within the box. The next thing I do is I might vary this somewhat, which you're free to do continuously, and then draw the bottom portion of the boat, which might appear something like this. And then, of course, I would add the seats in the boat, always headed for the vanishing point. As you notice here, it always heads, the seat heads for the vanishing point, so does the intersection. Even if I'm drawing a boat, I draw the box that the boat will fit into. Without that, I don't have a referent. Then the direction of the box helps me decide on the elements that comprise the boat. If I'm to draw a freighter, say, I put the kind of box down that I feel a freighter would fit into. Then I X the front to get the middle line. Now I know that a freighter has a surface that moves from the middle line and flows right into this line with a graceful curve. How do you get that on the other side? You project the point that this line touches this line. You project it back toward the vanishing point. And you've got to accomplish this curve in this shorter distance. So in order to get this line to flow into that, you're going to have to bulge it out to get it to flow into that. So the lines are not the same on both sides. That's how I get the shape of a boat. Then I know that the boat has back rake, that is, it leans back. Then I know that a boat drops down, goes back. You have to know something about a boat if you're drawing it. And then I head for the vanishing point, and I repeat this system back here. And I make this, the back end of the boat, I draw an ellipse in the earth plane. And then I curve this down. Now I know that a boat sinks in here and then it swells out like that. But you have to know a lot about a boat before you would even attempt to draw it. It's sunken in here, then it moves out. Then I'll put the cabin up on the boat. I'm going to exaggerate it. I'm going up. How high up? To this line. Then I'm going back to the vanishing point and dropping down. Then I'm headed back for the vanishing point again. And so whatever the cabin looks like on the boat, you draw. Then if you draw a stack, I'm going to back rake it. That is, there's an ellipse here and an ellipse here. And I draw an ellipse on top, just emphasizing this side, because the ellipse goes down toward the vanishing point. And as I head this stack for the other vanishing point, that gives me the size of the next stack. So I'm not trying to draw an accurate boat here, showing you the basic principles of how I go about drawing a boat. although some of my renderings might appear very complex and somewhat beyond your experience, but just watch. No matter how complex a drawing is, it's still the same two vanishing points that we're using during the initial phases of art. So learning how to use those vanishing points and gradually increasing the complexity of the drawing, you will be able to render many different views. If you wish to draw, say, eyeglasses, you draw the kind of box the eyeglass would fit into, then you draw the lens on the left side, the lens on the right side, and the nose bridge. Then you draw the extensions that go back toward the ear. Once you've completed that, you go to the next phase, which is giving the eyeglass portion depth, which I'll show you on the next drawing. Notice this box. The function of this box is to begin to shape the lens. The lens isn't straight, or the eyeglass portion is not straight or flat. It's like the next drawing. You'll notice the curvature in this, and that curvature is indicated by the depth of perspective. You notice the depth here shown in this box? I'm going to tilt the paper to make it easier. So I'm going to draw the eyeglasses and give them curvature in this box. I go back to the corner and to the foreground. So here I've changed the shape of the lenses. Of course I can round out the corners and I can add additions, but in order to get to this point, it's better to draw a box to control the angle of the lenses. Of course, you have to practice this, and that's why I'm having you do all these different boxes in perspective to gain control of shape and configuration. If you wish to draw some electronic unit that has somewhat of an odd shape, you always draw the box. Then after you've completed the box, pick some point on the corner and head it up for the corner of the box. And then extend that box into the background and run this line up to that extended corner. And then add as many buttons as you want to. If you don't have a sharp corner, say it's round, you leave a highlight in the middle and shade the side portion of the box, and then skip a space and shade this area dark. But make this area definitely darker than the front portion. And this is how you draw odd shapes. You carve it out of a box as you do all other forms. If I want to draw an automobile, say a sports car, the first thing I do is draw the box, the kind of box that I believe the car will fit in. That is the lower portion of the car. Then I will move it up off the ground. That is my perspective drawing. The corner line would be above the ground line. This is the ground line. And it's going to be a ground line rendition of an automobile. So I then add the next phase to the drawing. The next phase is this. If you can see the box was right here. It's still a little difficult to see. Then I draw the lower portion of the car, and then I would add the upper portion, depending on the car that I'm drawing. I would lean inward like this, and then head for the vanishing point. And I would head this upper region to the opposite vanishing point. And so here you have a preliminary sketch of an automobile. And then, of course, I would get rid of the corners, round out the windshield, change the back of the car, run the fender downward, cut out the ellipses for the wheels. All of that is added later. Then you cut this away, because the car really isn't square, that is most of them. So if I wish to put a grill in here, I'm going to pull away from the vanishing point. This is the vanishing point. I'm pulling away from it, and the grill would follow the contour. See this basic contour here? I use that as my reference for doing the grille on a car. Now the headlights would be at right angles to this line. That is across like the letter T, and then I form an ellipse. And if I were to put a headlight here, I don't know what size to make it. So I head this headlight for the vanishing point, this point. And that gives me the size of the ellipse on the opposite side, which is also at right angles to a center line. So this is basic. Now, the more you know about a car, the more you can add to it. For example, I might shade the windshield with a slanted line so that the highlight comes out at an angle, which means the windshield is tilted forward. All of that depends on your knowledge of a car. So now the sides of the car may have a bulge. It may not be flat, might be round like this. So, or it might also be the position of the door. So you add to that drawing continuously until it looks like the kind of car you want it to look like. So roughly, you always draw a box that the object you've got in mind will fit into. Although this drawing may appear very complicated, those of you that have done your homework, if you study this drawing carefully, you will notice that the center line goes to the vanishing point, and the wing, even the center line of the wing, goes to the opposite vanishing point. You'll notice that the ellipse crosses at right angles to the center line, and that all of the structural elements of the aircraft also go to vanishing point A and vanishing point B. All of these elements only go to two vanishing points, although the appearance may cause you to hesitate and think, my, what a complex drawing. Actually, it's really based on two vanishing points. As you study it carefully, you will see that all of these lines converge on the vanishing point. Perhaps this is somewhat oversimplified, but in essence, you can see the center line going to the vanishing point. You can see that the ellipse, even this ellipse, goes to the vanishing. It's at right angles to the center line, and the center line goes to the vanishing point. You notice that the ellipse within the fuselage or body of the aircraft also crosses at right angles to the center line. You notice that the wheels also cross at right angles to the center line, like the letter T, as you see it in here. Here you will see that the front wheels have a slightly different angle, yet they are at right angles to the center line. So really, the complexity of a drawing is only in your head. But when you see a drawing and begin to look at it in terms of the vanishing point A and vanishing point B, it will help you simplify your understanding of a complex drawing. I'm going to illustrate how ellipses are used in basic illustration. Before we even draw an ellipse, we draw the letter T with the upper bar crossing at right angles to the center line. In other words, if it's angular, it won't work out. So even the bottom is at right angles to the center line. If you tilt the center line, this is still at right angles to the center line. It'll begin to have meaning as we progress into this. So I'm going to rotate the paper to make it a little easier for me to draw an ellipse. If I draw an ellipse over that line, in other words, this is the depth and this is the width of the ellipse. Even this ellipse is at right angles to the center line. And if I'm about to draw, say, a tin can, I then rotate my paper so that I can join these ellipses together. And if it doesn't fit, I'll extend the ellipse so it does fit. Now, you're free to do all these things in the beginning. That's why we suggest that you do your drawings freehand, just to gain control of the pencil or the medium you're drawing in. Now, if this is a leading edge, I'm going to strengthen the leading edge. That is, make it darker. This would be the leading edge. And if it's a drawing of a glass or a tin can, the bottom line rotates right up into the vertical, like this. It doesn't smack into it, it flows into it. Then when we shade it, we can either start dark and decrease the pressure as we go, so it's less intense. Then we skip a space and continue the process. Now, where the can is light, we make the inside dark, and we ease out as we move along toward the center. Notice it's dark here where it's light, and where it's light, it's dark. And that's basically the way we illustrate a can, a tin can, say. Now you can carry it on a little further if you wish to. That's the basic principle. Now if you want to put a top on the can and open it, you draw another ellipse. First you draw the angle, and you get that by pivoting from this point and swinging an arc. You swing an arc, in other words, in the manner you want to open that tin can. So here, over this, I will draw another ellipse. That represents the top of the can being pried off the perspective. So I can open it to any degree. All you have to do is use this line for your reference. So first you draw a straight line, and then you develop your ellipse over that line. So here I'm illustrating how you can open the top of the can in various degrees, but it should touch this quarter arc. This is a box to receive another glass container of different proportions. This is your horizon line, your vanishing point A and B. Remember, if it doesn't go to the vanishing point, it'll come out distorted. So I'm going to prepare for an ellipse in the upper box by putting dots in the four corners. This gives me the height of the ellipse, and this gives me the width of the ellipse. So I'm going to rotate the paper to make it easier to draw. So I draw a small circle here, which is about 1/2 this distance. Whatever this distance is, I draw a circle about 1/2 that. Then I run from the top of that circle through the dot into this circle. Then I rotate the page upside down and go from the bottom of this circle through the dot and into this circle. Then I go over again and clean it up, meaning take out the abrupt changes in the line to get them to curve gently. So here you've got a round end, if you notice it. Most amateurs draw a pointed end on the ellipse. It's always round. How round? About half of this distance. Now to get the ellipse on the bottom section of the glass container, I'm going to put a dot here, and the four bottom corners. Then I've got to draw a midsection line, which is about here. Then I have to fill this out so that this ellipse on the bottom is wider, not wider, but deeper than the upper one. So I rough in this ellipse. Then I go over it. The reason I sketch is I can change the lines. But when you draw hard and positively, you can't make the correct changes in the line. So I rotate the paper so it's easier. Remember, this flows into that. It doesn't hit it suddenly. It rolls into that. Now to get from here to this point, I have to fill it out more. And then notice how rough the sketch is. I'm going to clean it up. But I have to have some frame of reference to go by. So here is a rough outline of the glass container. This is just to remind you that the width and height of the ellipse will vary depending on how high you are above an ellipse. The higher you go, in fact, if you're directly on top of it, it'll appear as a circle. As you move a glass downward, you will notice that the ellipse will change. So keeping that in mind, the aspect ratio, meaning the width to the height, is drawn first. And then you develop the ellipse around the width and the height, or depth. So these are variations on the elliptical shape. And the degree of radius that you put here is approximately 1/2 of what this distance is. So here you have a very tight roll, then it becomes larger and larger, as though this were a portion of a circle, which is based upon half this distance. And this is a drawing of a coffee cup, a side view of a coffee cup, which is something you're familiar with. Once you draw the coffee cup at an angle, you project it straight over to get the size of the upper ellipse, and the width is gotten this way, and the opening from these two lines. And that gives you where the lower ellipse would fall, and where the handle, by taking the handle straight over to a rear view, you've got the handle of the cup. So this is a cup turned in an unusual direction. Now, of course, when I draw, I don't have all these lines. I can draw the cup directly in perspective. If I want to, I can render a cup like this. But in my head, all this information is there already. So I don't need all the lines that you use. I can sit down and I can draw a perspective of a cup. Then I put tracing paper over it and pick it off clean. Then I emphasize or strengthen these lines, correct these curves, and then I double the thickness of the leading edge of the cup, which is much thicker than a single line. Then I strengthen the lines here so they're visually stronger. So, but before you draw, if you learn these laws, then you can go right on. And it isn't that the artist visualizes anything, it's that they've learned the laws. And they've got the laws in their head. They've got the vanishing points in their head, and they head for the vanishing point automatically. So we'll do the next illustration. This is the same system applied to plant life. This represents the stem of a plant. Various stems going off in different directions. You notice that they flow into the shaft here. In other words, they don't hit it abruptly like that, although some branches do. Now, I'm about to draw a flower at the end of these stems, but in order to do that, I have to draw an ellipse at right angles. So I draw a line that crosses the center line of the stem at right angles. Then I make a decision as to the proportions of the ellipse. This is faked. Then I join that with an ellipse. I'll clean it up later. Now, an ellipse at right angles to this shaft would be something like this. I'm drawing direct, and the ellipse on this end of the shaft would be similar. But this would be somewhat different. Right angle to that shaft would be about this. And right angle to this shaft would be about that. So then I draw an ellipse. Then I draw half a cup or half a circle underneath that. I don't sketch as rigidly as this. I do it freehand, more like this, so I can control it better. If I draw direct, it's hard to make changes. But if I sketch, like I'm doing now, it's easier. If this is to become a flower, I will fair this, that is, blend this into that shape, which you see me doing here now. I will blend all of these half rounds directly into the base of the flower. Then I will draw petals going to the center. This is faking, of course. There's no particular flower. Then I draw the same petals on the opposite side, just a little smaller, all headed for the center. So when you start drawing a flower, of course, you have to draw the petals that you see in front of you. So here is the basic system of bringing the petals to the center to start with, just to get a rough idea. It doesn't have to be a real flower. You just have to get used to drawing the ellipses and the petals in their appropriate place. The same process will be continued through all of these. Then you have a shaft in the middle of the plant, which is shaped very differently. Of course, it depends on the flower you're drawing. So this is basically the approach that you use. And this is basically what the artist is doing when they draw. They're tracing an image that they have in their associative memory. That is, the way they remember a flower. But if you don't have a reference or a flower in front of you, it's very hard to put the details in correctly. But so you don't have to. What you have to do to start with is draw an ellipse, a half round, and a shaft. Once you get used to that, you have the basis for putting a flower on the shaft of the plant. In this illustration, we're emphasizing variations on the theme. I'm moving forward from the ellipse. This is the ellipse. Then I'm turning the petal downward. And if this, again, is a fictitious plant, but if you want to know how to handle that, you use the ellipse as a guide, and you use a real plant, which gives you a picture of just how these things are drawn, or how they appear. Now you'll notice that the leaves show a little bit of the underside. This makes it more interesting. Being a fictitious plant, this is a good system for you to use to practice drawing. Remember that even the process of light and shade is lawful. There is no aspect of rendering that isn't lawful. That meaning that you can't find a point of reference to work from. A person that doesn't use law will never be able to render drawings accurately. When you use the law, you control the size and relationships of objects. And I'll show you how to maintain relationships and proportions as we gain more and more experience. This is a top view of a circle divided into several segments of equal distance. When the lines are brought down to the foreground of the ring, you'll notice that they're getting closer to one another as we approach the end on both sides. This same concept can be used in putting your shading in, knowing what values to use in each segment. This is the same process described over and over again. You'll notice that these lines are getting closer and closer as we approach the end of the bowl. We varied the shape somewhat so you can see the emphasis on the lines. In the middle, the line is straight. On the right, it's curved toward this shape, and on the left side, we change the direction of the curvature. That helps you control the shading. The shading runs up to the lines, and so you keep easing on your pressure. Or if you're working with paint, you begin to thin out shading so that it starts dark, whether it's dark green or dark gray. You lighten the gray as you go into these different areas. Where it's light, you darken the inside. Where it's dark, you lighten the inside. This will help bring out the shape and form of the object you're drawing. This is a simplified diagram of how a shadow is established. We have two vanishing points, then we put the source of light here. And then you run the beam, the light beam, to the edge of the drawing until it hits the surface. Then you run another line through this corner and another line through the base, and then extend that forward. In other words, shade the object on the dark side. So here's the dark side, this is the extended shadow. The extended shadow depends on the amount of detail that you have in here and the time of the day. The value that you put on here should be somewhat similar to the shadow, only the shadow is always darker close to the object, and then it lightens up. If you're born with a larger brain, with better neurotransmitters, and associating with ignorant people, you can become ignorant faster. It isn't the size of the brain or the quality of the tissue. It's what enters the brain through environment and experience. In drawing a sphere, you start dark and ease up on the pressure until it's about a half tone, and then a third of it. In other words, don't make it the same darkness. Some of the daylight reflects on the bottom of the sphere, so you have a separation between the shadow and the ball. And the highlight is about a quarter back from the edge. The highlight will vary, of course, but the easing up on the pressure is the important aspect. The shadow is always darkest nearer the ball, then it eases out. You'll notice that the ellipse is in the horizontal plane, the same plane that the horizon's in. And these lines represent the emphasis on the horizontal plane. In drawing people, it's a good idea to start with the letter T.
Okay.
You can divide the upper line of the letter T into 3 equal distances, as shown here. Then you add the eyes. Now the separation of the eyes, approximately 1 eye can fit between the eyes, approximately. And so once you get that proportion down pat, then you add the nose. The nose extends from this point to the end of the eye, 45 degrees down at this angle, and looks like the letter V upside down.
Wow.
You can add the letter V upside down or bring this information, the separation of the eyes, straight down, which gives you the width of the letter V. Then you add a circle in the middle and then a very thin ellipse in this area. And for the eyebrows, approximately 1 eye above with a similar curvature, 1 on each side. This is the basis for laying out the beginnings of a face. The next thing is to add the circle of the eye, which is larger. In other words, the circle will be hidden behind the eyelid. They draw it too small as a rule. So here we have a circle that is larger than the opening of the eye. The next thing we do is draw a straight line across the bottom and an ellipse on that line, followed by a front view of a bird in flight. Does this look like a bird in flight? And the wings extend to about the middle of the eye. Then you repeat that bird in flight above. And then followed by a half round underneath it, just a half round. Then you can darken the upper lip only and beneath the bottom lip. And you can darken the area under the eyebrows, and the one side of the nose can be darkened. And then a half round on each side of the nose. And then from the half round to the side of the mouth. And then from the corner of the eye, from the lower left portion of the eye, another circle, portion of a circle. And this is the basic outline of a face. Of course, if you wish to emphasize, you can shade the under portion of the nose and make the nostrils relatively dark inside the ellipse. So this is a basic form. So this would also occur on the opposite side, just under the eyebrows. Of course, the eyebrows would be darker and more detailed, but this is a basic outline. Now, if you want to get the length of the chin, it's approximately from this point to this point. The chin is about the same width as the mouth turned sideways. So here you get the chin. And you move to about half an eye to the side of the eye, about half the width of the eye to the side, and then you join those by filling it out. Don't try to go from the chin right to that point. Fill it out. And then you fill it out on this side, and the eyes, by the way, are in the middle of the head. So you got plenty of room above. And the forehead, the hair comes down this point. The ears appear as a half a heart. In other words, that looks approximately like half a heart. And so you draw half a heart from the top of the eyebrow to the bottom of the nose. And so this is basically the way you begin to lay out a face. Then you can take a simplified drawing of a nose and begin to shade the nostrils, as shown here, one side generally darker than the other side. So by shading this till it looks like it, you gain control of shape and configuration. You use this technique just to get started. Start drawing noses, eyes separately, just so you get used to it. Drawing a mouth or lips, there are different types of lips. And once you begin to illustrate, you begin to notice the difference. And you don't always have to look at the person you're drawing. You can look at the lips and their configuration and assign a name to them. You can compare it to a movie actress that has lips of these different configurations. Then all you have to do is look at the person and then stop looking, just draw the lips. And then look at the nose and compare it to other noses and draw that type of nose. But you don't have to keep looking up and back at the lips to get the shape. Just get into the practice of drawing different lips in different positions. As you progress along the lines in which you've taken the letter T, put the eyes on, and began to shade darkness under the eyebrow, under this eyebrow, and you begin to shade half the nose and the cheek. So you shade under the nose, under the eyebrows, under the nose, under the lower lip, and shade the upper lip dark, and then the chin, under the chin. So you're drawing a ellipse here to guide you in shading that region. And then, of course, the neck, since it's recessed back, and the ears half a heart, approximately that. So you get into the habit of drawing. So if you get in the habit of shading, that gives it depth when you shade. If you leave out the shading, the face is relatively flat. After you've completed shading the nose, under the eyebrows, under the nose, you have to do the side of the face. So here you have a triangular region. Here's another triangular region. And here's an additional area. So if you shade that dark within the areas, it helps bring out the contour of the face. It needn't be exactly like that, but preliminarily, if you do this, you can begin to get depth. Now, even in this region, there is a lean inboard like this. And so you can begin the hairline approximately a nose above. And then the hairline comes down here, and then between the ear and the side of the head, you can darken this region. So I'm going to repeat this. So the forehead tapers in slightly on most people. Then you have a triangle or wedge shape, which you darken, and then the cheek, which you darken, which is an additional triangle, and then under the chin, which you darken, and then a darker triangle, which you see here. And you make that darkest because that's recessed. And of course the ear would be darker because it's in the background.